So I know that Kevin Hilton usually steers the ship, but unfortunately he is unable to be here today. My name is Susan Avery. I'm the Marketing and Communications Associate with Impact. I'm typically the woman behind the screen. So while you never see me, I am on every one of these webinars. So Kevin asked me to step in for the day. So welcome back to our Impact Tech series of webinars that we have running this fall leading up to our next annual conference. So I am happy to announce that the registration is now open for our 2022 North American Ironworkers Impact Conference. It's going to be held this time February 20th through the 23rd at the Hilton San Francisco Union Square. And the theme for 2022 is Impact Equals Innovation. So before we get going, a couple of housekeeping items. We monitor the Q&A box only during the webinar. We do not monitor the chat box. So if you have a question, please ask it at any time. That the Q&A box is at the bottom of your screen. We will make sure that we answer all the questions during the course of the webinar. If for some reason we don't get to it, I will make sure that Steve gets all of the questions that are asked today, and he or somebody from Ergo will be happy to follow up with you. So we'll also post the recording of this webinar to the Impact website tomorrow, along with the slides from this in a PDF format. And we're going to do about a 25-minute presentation and leave a few minutes at the end for those questions. And then, of course, just FYI, Ergo will have a booth at the conference in February in San Francisco. So we look forward to seeing everybody there. We are fortunate enough today to have Steve Egon with us. He is an audiologist and the head of sales development at Ergo. And he is going to give you a little bit of his background and then dive right into the topic today, which is hearing loss. So Steve, on to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you for having me and Ergo to participate in this. And thank you for everybody has joined us for joining us. And my hope is that you will get some great information out of this. And you will have a contact email and name at the end of the presentation, who you are welcome to follow up with a colleague of mine when we're finished. So a quick background for myself so that you know where I'm coming from. So I am an audiologist, as you heard Susan say. I have actually been practicing in the profession for 31 years now. It does age me a little bit, but with that age comes experience and hopefully some wisdom that I can pass along. In the unique career that I've had as an audiologist, I practiced for about a third of my life in a traditional clinical setting, working for ear, nose, and throat doctors at hospitals, and also working in more retail, I guess you would say retail hearing aid environments. So I was able to cut my teeth on a lot of face-to-face contact at the beginning of my career. And then I was fortunate enough to move into a couple of different startup companies that eventually were purchased, and was able to then do a lot of research regarding the consumer journey, customer experience, how people process information about making decisions regarding hearing aids. I have seen and tried virtually every hearing aid made and designed under the sun, everything from a $20 hearing aid you can buy through the mail up to $10,000 premium devices that you can purchase at a number of places. So to say that I've been around the block is probably an understatement in this industry. So, you know, again, 25 minutes will probably not be nearly enough time to cover everything that you would all like to hear and that I can share, but hopefully this will be enough pertinent information for us to really set a good foundation moving forward. So with that being said, we will go ahead and dive in, and I'm going to depend on Susan to flag me, and she's free to interrupt with questions that get asked as we go, and we can save it to the end. So I don't want this presentation to be about Ergo, but I am going to give you just a brief overview of, you know, who I work for and why I'm here. So Ergo is a very innovative hearing aid manufacturer. So what makes us really unique and what brought me to Ergo 5 years ago is that not only is this manufacturer or our company one that has designed a hearing aid from scratch. We are in the 31 years I've been doing this, Ergo is the only other hearing aid company outside of the big ones that you would see at doctor's offices and so forth that designed and built their own hearing aid. It was designed by an ear, nose, and throat doctor and had some other geniuses from big tech companies that helped out. But essentially what we've done is we've studied consumer behavior and what people want and built our hearing aid in a very customer-centric way. We know that people want invisibility to reduce stigma. We know that comfort is a main driver. For years, it's been a main driver towards people accepting hearing aids. People want ease of use and modern convenience, which is why we have made all of our virtually invisible hearing aids rechargeable. But we do, the beautiful thing about what we do as well is that not only can you purchase these direct to consumer, which cuts cost and introduces telehealth and telemedicine to the equation of hearing care, but we also have a team of over 40 licensed hearing professionals that provide personalized support before, during, and after your purchase of our devices. We also have built technology that allows you to customize how the hearing aids operate by using an app on your phone or by connecting with one of our hearing professionals who can do remote programming. You could be in your pajamas in your bedroom and our audiologist can be at a computer and send programming changes to your hearing aids. And bottom line, we just wanted to build something that people are going to want to use because of the low market penetration, which I'm going to get to. So you can see on the top picture here, that is an Ergo device in place. We have to do a close-up to actually see it. Below you can see the devices. So that's virtually all I'm going to say about Ergo. You can go to ergo.com to review more, but that's why I'm here and what makes me get up in the morning every day and come to work. All right, so let's talk about the prevalence of hearing loss and some things that the industry itself is trying to solve for. So what we know right now is that based on estimates that roughly almost 50 million US adults have some type of hearing loss that is treatable with a hearing aid. But the problem is that only about 25% of that 50 million or 48 million actually own a hearing aid and do something about it. And even more shocking is that people wait an average of 7 years from when they first notice that they're having hearing loss until they actually take action and do something about it. And do something about it could be seeing a doctor if you have a medical condition, but over 95% of adults have what we call sensory neural hearing loss, which is simply meaning that the inner ear where our nerve endings, hair cells, and so forth communicate with the brain actually is damaged either from the aging process or noise reduction or noise exposure. But that 7 years is something that has always frustrated us in the industry because we want people, we feel it's needless for people to suffer for 7 years, but we know there's reasons why people wait. And I'm going to get to that in just a moment here, but we're trying to speed up that adoption process. So there is a huge burden of hearing loss, and that is that hearing loss is the third most common medical condition in the United States after hypertension and arthritis. And a lot of people don't know that. And it costs the US and globally, it costs about $750 billion a year in everything from lost wages to increased risk of other medical conditions and so on and so forth. Again, I know I'm going kind of quickly here, but you will have the slide deck to review where there's some of the links at the bottom to do more research. But it is a huge, huge problem. And so when we talk about why it takes people 7 years and why the market penetration is so low, my own personal opinion and experience is that there's still, even with the innovation of a device like Ergo that's invisible, there is a stigma that goes along with purchasing and wearing hearing aids. And it signifies a lot of things, and it's a little bit different to everybody. Another big reason is hearing aids are incredibly expensive. The average cost as reported for a pair of hearing aids going to a traditional brick and mortar office, which is where most hearing aids are purchased, is almost $5,000. And there are steps being taken to try to reduce that, which I'm going to get to it. And there's also innovation from companies like Ergo and some of our competitors that are also trying to bring that down. And then given the modern crazy busy lifestyle that we all lead today, it can also be very inconvenient for people to take time out of their day and make multiple trips to offices and work around very strict, times that offices are open and doing business, as opposed to, some online companies that are open basically 24/7, if you want to consider it that way. So of those people that do wear hearing aids, the bottom line that we know through research is that people are looking for comfort. Now, we have to break comfort down into a few different ways, and I'm going to talk about these briefly here, because a mentor that I had many years ago really instilled this in me, that whether we are a hearing professional practicing in the office or we are a designer of hearing aids, a manufacturer like Ergo, what we're trying to do is hit these three different areas of comfort. And if we can achieve success within these areas, then we are going to have greater market penetration, greater acceptance, and happier clients that are using devices. So if I break these down real quick, they're pretty obvious. And I'm going to use these pictures, and hopefully you can see my cursor moving around on the screen. So the first thing is, when we talk about wearing comfort, we're simply talking about how does it physically feel to wear a hearing aid. It's like, a pair of shoes, a pair of jeans. Our hearing is the hearing aid that you're wearing comfortable, okay? If we look at this one up here in the upper left-hand corner that's virtually invisible, an issue that happens with these devices is that they're made out of a very hard acrylic material, so that when you put them in the ear, they actually plug the ear up, and they can make your voice sound funny and not allow ambient sounds around you from entering the ear canal. So they can provide hearing improvement and some hearing benefit, but they also have a number of drawbacks. So this, for example, would not be a situation that would more than likely provide wearing comfort. These make up a small percentage of hearing aids. The other thing I want to move down to now is the second one here, is psychological comfort. And this is the big one that goes back to stigma. And that is, how do you as a person wearing hearing aids, or how do I actually feel about wearing it? Okay, so if we look at a behind the ear style, for example, or this larger one that's all in the ear, a lot of people will get benefit from wearing a hearing aid like this, but they're larger. They're going to be more noticeable, and especially with men that have shorter hair or no hair, a behind the ear device will stand out. It'll be visible, and that people don't like to have attention called to themselves like that. Same thing with a device like this. It's going to be more noticeable. But even with some of the invisible styles, some people will still feel self-conscious or have that psychological barrier that they're dealing with. And then the last piece, which again is super critical, is how does it sound? Is the sound of the hearing aid comfortable? Can you walk into loud or soft situations or noisy environments, and does the sound not become uncomfortable? Is speech clear? Does music sound clear? Can you stream music or television to your hearing aids? And so, that's a big piece. So as I talked about, if we hit all three of these components, we will have a successful fitting. So if we look at these devices here, and again, not to do a plug for Ergo, but to show the difference, because there are other direct-to-consumer devices out there. But with Ergo, what has worked with us with our focus groups that we've conducted is that you have a device in the canal that is virtually invisible, so that helps with the psychological comfort. The tips of the hearing aids are made out of soft silicone that conform to the shape of the ear, so you have the wearing comfort, and that doesn't provide a plugged up feeling. And then by having the hearing aid inside the ear canal where Mother Nature intended us to hear, we have a very natural sounding hearing aid that's providing that clarity. So that's what we're trying to do and what we're focused on all the time. All right. So something that Susan brought up as we were waiting for everybody to log in is, I want to touch briefly here on what it's like to actually have hearing loss. And there's a huge difference between hearing and understanding. So the first thing I want to talk about is that hearing loss is not a sickness. It's not a medical condition. We talk about it at Ergo as simply telling people that you've just enjoyed a life well lived. been to rock concerts, I'm a musician, I know that at some point in my lifetime, and that's coming up very soon, I'm going to suffer from hearing loss due to the noise exposure I've had from playing music and also just from getting older. But it's not a sickness. It's something that 48 million people have and they're dealing with. But the difference between hearing and understanding is hearing is simply being able to detect sound. So I'm knocking on my desk right now, and you should be able to hear that. But what I'm saying to you is the understanding. So it's the sound coming into your ear that has speech components to it. The inner ear is processing all of those consonants and vowel sounds, making sense of it, and then sending it to the brain, then where our brain puts labels on it and we can understand and make sense and carry on conversations or put labels to things that we've heard, for example. So there's a distinct difference. So what can happen, and Susan, this might be you, is you may have normal hearing, but the pathway between the ear to the brain could be impaired in some way, and your ear just may not do very well as far as filtering noise and speech and getting that to the brain for processing. But what most people experience when we talk about hearing loss is they do lose sensitivity to some sounds, but then by not giving to the brain all the sounds we need for understanding, that's where people will talk about, well, and you'll see some of the symptoms below. People will say, well, it sounds like somebody's mumbling to me. Voices just aren't clear. Or I can hear my wife or children's voice. I can hear people talking. I just can't understand them. The big one in our industry is by far and away is that when you get into a restaurant or a noisy situation, people will say, I'm just lost. Okay, I know somebody's talking to me, but the background noise just makes it virtually impossible to understand what people are saying. So, TV is a big one, and we can always understand better if we have hearing loss by turning up the TV volume, but then we can annoy people that are sitting in the same room with us, who don't want to listen to it that loudly. So if we look at this, then I want to break this down real quickly here as an example. So when we can't understand speech, hearing loss plays a really cruel trick as it occurs in our life. So vowel sounds, we all know our vowels, A, E, I, O, U, sometimes Y. Our vowel sounds is what gives our speech body, okay? It provides the bulk of the volume and the presence of what we hear. But when it comes to understanding, which is where hearing loss impacts us, unfortunately, is when we first start to suffer age-related or noise-induced hearing loss, what happens is it makes it difficult to understand consonants, which typically occur at the beginning and endings of words. So I'm going to give you an example, and I gave you the answer already here. And these are all examples from clients that we've helped where I've picked these up from talking to them over the years. So if somebody said to me, I misunderstood when my wife said, watch out for and I didn't catch the last word. If we took the consonants out, all of a sudden that last word and all we heard was the or. It could be watch out for the floor, watch out for the door, the sword. Hopefully it's not a sword, but watch out for the board. It could be those. Now let's look at the next example here. Can you tell me what, okay? So could it be what wine this is, what time it is, what sign it is? So it's all of the S's, the T's, the F sounds, the K sounds. It's those beginning and ending consonants. Another example is this one here. This was actually one of the most vivid memories I ever had when I first graduated college with my audiology degree, and I was helping somebody who was a senior vice president of sales. He misunderstood an order in a meeting from a client that he had landed, and the client wanted to order 13 boxes of his product, but the person thought that he heard 30. And it led to a very embarrassing situation for that gentleman in a boardroom with 10 or so other people. And when that happened, that is when he first said, I've got to do something about this because it's getting in the way of my job. So if we move on to now, you remember when I said earlier that it takes somebody about an average of 7 years before when they first notice hearing loss till they do something about it. During that 7 years, we now have decades of research. There are numerous studies and studies ongoing, especially at Johns Hopkins University right now, where we know that if you let hearing loss go for a long period of time and don't do something about it, that it leads to all sorts of psychosocial problems. And I've listed some of these here. The big ones are, it's obvious that people avoid or withdraw from social situations. We hear that all the time, that people will stop going out to dinner, or they'll stop going to, they'll stop watching favorite shows on TV with their spouse or their family because they can't keep the volume at a comfortable level. The big one that we're really hearing about is cognitive function, or impaired memory and ability to learn new tasks. The longer that hearing loss goes on and on and on without doing anything about it, then if you stop stimulating the auditory cortex of the brain, you actually are depriving and starving the brain of sounds and things that we need to learn, and it affects our memory. So there's more studies being done at Johns Hopkins to tie that completely together, but we have enough anecdotal studies that tell us that. So I'm not going to read through all of the bullet points here, but there's plenty of information if you do a simple Google search and ask and search for untreated hearing loss, what are the ramifications of it, you can find that information out. Now, the good news is there is absolutely no debate that once you get hearing aids, okay, so for those of you who might be on this call to get information and you might be debating whether or not I want to spend the money or whether or not I want to wear something, maybe you're dealing with stigma, vanity issues, or cost, or whatever it may be, here's what we do know. WebMD did a study years ago that verified that, for example, 8 out of 10 people that purchased hearing aids, 80%, will come back and say that using hearing aids improved their overall quality of life. So all of these things, that's quality of life. Hearing aids will improve that. 7 out of 10 people say that wearing hearing aids improve their relationships with people closest to them. Now, what improves relationships is our ability to communicate with each other and understand and listen. That's a vital, important thing to have as a human being. And then 3 out of 4 people said all of a sudden their confidence came back, that they started doing things that they didn't used to do. Again, now let's talk about hearing healthcare, or what healthcare professionals have said. And these are going to be our doctors, mostly our family doctors is where this study. So when we're dealing with physicians or ear, nose, and throat doctors who are common, 100% of those healthcare professionals have said that hearing aids improve their patients' quality of life when they had hearing loss. And what we have seen is reduced blood pressure. We have seen stress levels reduce in patients. We have seen for people that showed signs of cognitive impairment or maybe withdrawal from situation, that they're now active again and they're processing information better. So it's just without question, it's once you make that leap, okay, and you actually purchase hearing aids, whether it's from Ergo or anybody else, and you're working with somebody that knows what they're doing, is that you will have a positive outcome. And that's, I know that we're running up against time here, but that is such a critical piece that I wanted people to look at, and you will be able to see this, is these numbers speak for themselves. All right, so I want to touch on very quickly here 2 things before we wrap up. There is a distinct difference. If we look at the current state of hearing aids that are available today, there are 2 very distinct classes that are that you will see out there. You have something that are called PSAPs, which are personal sound amplifiers. PSAPs, as defined by the current FDA legislation, is that these are devices that are not intended or made to address hearing loss and are not allowed to be marketed as such. So I have some examples here. PSAPs are everything to the right of the screen that you're seeing here. $149 for a pair, $89, $177. These are all just general amplifiers that will slightly raise volume for you, but they are not intended to be specific. Bose is in a unique category right now, which I'll touch on the next screen. Ergo and this hearing aid down here to the bottom right. these are actually hearing aids. So right now, the FDA classifies hearing aids under two medically exempt categories that are intended to compensate for impaired hearing. And that's where you have Ergo and a device like this one right here, which is an Oticon device. The price that you see on the screen here is just for one, so you would have to double that if you were getting two. But you can see the big difference. The giveaway here for a PSAP is the low cost compared to something that's an actual hearing aid that has to go under much more scrutiny than a PSAP device. Now, why did I bring this up as far as these two different classifications? Because just a couple of weeks ago, the FDA came out with proposed changes to the hearing aid classification category. And what they are doing, and this is slated for in 2023 sometime, early 2023, is that there will be a new category of hearing aids called over-the-counter or OTC. And this is where Ergo is going to be slotted into, and this is where you're going to see Bose and some other disruptors in the industry that will still have to be labeled as a hearing aid. They will have to follow very strict regulatory guidelines and so forth. But what the goal of this new category is to address for 80 to 90% of adults that have mild to moderate hearing loss. The goal is to lower the cost, increase the competition, product choices, stimulate innovation, increase accessibility, and remove barriers for purchasing. And this we expect to be a huge driver towards change and towards more people getting hearing aids. Now, some of the highlights in the legislation is that it is for people with mild to moderate hearing loss, which again, it's estimated in that 80 to 90% of adults suffer that type of hearing loss. If you have severe to profound hearing loss and require the care of a prescriptive hearing aid where you need to see an ear, nose, and throat doctor or an audiologist, then you will have to continue going to that type of individual. OTC hearing aids will still meet very strict technical specifications and have to register with the FDA. And OTC hearing aids must meet certain labeling requirements, have to specifically state return standards, and also they're strongly encouraging, and we expect this to become in the final law, that they will have some degree of programming adjustments to customize to your care. Okay. Ergo's already here, and I know we're done. So thank you, Susan.
Steve, we are at 28 after, which means we've got only about 2 minutes left. So I want to make sure people are aware that we're going to be wrapping up right at 2:30. So if you've got questions for Steve, please make sure you bring them up now. If I don't get anything coming into the Q&A, I'm just going to let him keep going for another minute or so. But I did want to make sure that people know if they want to ask a question, get it in now. And if you do ask a question and it comes under the wire, I'll forward anything to Steve and he can make sure that either him or somebody else at Ergo follows up with you. And I'll let you go a little bit longer then. If you got some more that you want to say, you got about a minute here, Steve.
Okay, let me see if there's something that I can do to wrap up. So to give everybody on the line here an example of something that the FDA, with the goal of trying to make hearing aids more accessible, more convenient, and easier. If we look at the traditional path, again, which is still a very viable and needed path, and this is not to speak negatively about this, is the traditional path is involving a primary care doctor, an ENT, to sometimes get a referral for if you have an insurance benefit to cover. But it involves, working within doctor's hours. It involves calling for appointments and seeing licensed hearing professionals, going through the clinic for an exam, and then making repeated trips for fitting appointments and adjustments and so forth. So for a number of people, this can be a very cumbersome process, but it also adds quite a bit to the cost, which I told you was average about $4,600 to $5,000 in the traditional path. If we look at,
we do have a couple of questions now. Perfect. I think that you'll be able to knock these off quickly and then we got to wrap up. So I have somebody who says, how resistant are these types of aids to perspiration? So an Ergo device for perspiration is actually quite resistant because it fits deeply inside the ear canal and it's not touching the outer part of the ear or laying up against the head. It is very resistant to, not absorbing moisture and sweat and other debris that could go in through the hearing aid. Okay, and then the other one that we're getting 2 questions for is, does Ergo's product help for tinnitus or the ear ringing?
Great question. So I will try to answer this as quickly as possible. All hearing aids are designed to help speech clarity and understanding first. But as a secondary benefit, and this cannot be guaranteed by Ergo or any company, is that by simply wearing hearing aids, what you do is you stimulate the part of the inner ear that is responsible, typically where tinnitus comes from, and by feeding new information to the inner ear, whether it be ambient noise or speech clarity and so forth, is that you tend to distract the brain from the ringing in the ears and just keep it less focused. Okay, so it's a secondary benefit, but it is not a guaranteed benefit. Okay, but it does help quite a bit.
Great. And so unfortunately, that is all the time we had. We actually went a minute over. Steve, thank you once again for the fantastic presentation. I know for me, it was really personally interesting and gave me a lot of good information. So I just want to, remind everybody that the registration is open for the conference. Go to that Impact website, www.impact-net.org. You can check out the conference agenda and register online. And we'll see everybody in San Francisco. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.